Well, good afternoon, and thanks to all of you for attending this afternoon. Thanks to all of you for coming. My name is Greg Farley. I'm the director of the Center for Leadership in Environmental Education here at Chesapeake College. My institute and the college are proud to welcome the League of Women Voters and the League of Women Voters of the Midshore and their Electricity Choice Forum to campus this afternoon. I wanted to start with a sort of a personal tale, and that's that I live in the five-county service region that the college serves. And I receive a number of mailings and a number of phone calls every month that encourage me for various reasons to change my electric supply. Some of them promise me green power. Some of them promise me that they can save me money. Many of them promise me both. I consider myself a reasonably educated individual, but it's hard sometimes to discern where the truth lies and where the actual numbers might add up. So I'm really happy to bring this forum here and try and spread this message out to the general public. A little bit about the institute here at the college. The Center for Leadership in The Center for Leadership in Environmental Education is both a physical set of building plans here on the campus, and it is also a set of intellectual ideas. While we are still looking for funding to execute the building part of our plan, we're moving ahead with our educational goals. Those include some classroom goals, some actual academic curricula, ideas that we can translate into classes and degrees and transfer programs for our students. Those ideas also include some continuing education and workforce training components that will help us bring green power and new ideas and sustainability ideas into the workforce here on the Eastern Shore. And it also includes events like this. This is very much sort of well within our hope to do sort of a significant public research component to what we do. The idea being that we should be able to serve as a neutral and honest broker for all kinds of issues in green energy, in sustainability, and in renewable resources and resource conservation. So again, thanks to the League of Women Voters of the Midshore for bringing their forum here this afternoon. We appreciate them and their efforts in putting this panel together. And I would like to introduce at this point the president of the League of Women Voters of the Midshore, Ms. Janice Bain-Kerr, and she will go forth with introductions for us. Ms. Janice?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry that we have such a small turnout, but I'm sure that it will be a very good program nonetheless. The League of Women Voters of the Midshore, which represents Caroline, Dorchester, and Talbot counties, is pleased to partner with the Center for Leadership in Environmental Education here at Chesapeake College in bringing you today's educational forum on electricity supply to the public. Both the League and the college share a common interest in energy and environmental issues and a better understanding of how we, as organizations and individuals, can assist the public in understanding and making informed choices at the consumer, industry, and governmental levels. On a personal note, having grown up in a place and time when electricity was a luxury that my family didn't have access to and couldn't have afforded even if they did, I'm still in awe that with a flick of a switch, I have boundless access to electricity. But I struggle, as many consumers do, to understand electricity's creation, transmission, and distribution, as well as what all the nickel and dime charges on my monthly bill mean. I worry about how we must plan for and fund electricity programs to meet the needs of an increasingly hostile climate. I'm looking forward to having answers to these questions today. I'd like to thank Pat Camella and the members of the League and to Greg Farley and Chesapeake College for arranging this forum. Thanks also to the utilities and the industry reps for joining in the discussion today. Thank you, Pat.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today for this educational forum. During this part of the forum, which will last until approximately a few minutes before 10 after 5, because of the need to change the tape, we're going to stop maybe at 5:05 to 5:10, but not right at the, so we're going to cut it short a few minutes. I will serve as moderator during the question and answer period at the end of the afternoon. I think the easiest way to proceed is I have asked our panelists to sit in the order in which they will make their remarks. Each panelist, each set of representatives, because Delmarva has two, will have approximately, my arithmetic is off right now. We'll have approximately 10 minutes to 12 minutes. Just try to keep that in mind, just to give an overview of with your remarks, and then enough to stimulate questions later. So let me begin with our Delmarva Power representatives. We have John Petito and Bridget Shelton from Delmarva. John, I didn't have your, because I wasn't sure you were coming, I don't have you on the program, and I don't have your title. Yes. And Bridget is Customer and Community Relations Manager. From Choptank Electric Cooperative, we have Bob Belke, Vice President for Consumer Affairs. We then have from Maryland Office of People's Counsel, Peter Saar, an Assistant People's Counsel. And then on the far end, from CQI Associates, we have Joe Tabling. I will not, who is an associate, and CQI Associates is an aggregate broker and a licensed aggregate broker in Maryland, and he will give an overview of what it means to have alternative electricity suppliers. With that, I will stop, and I will just sit over there in the third seat, and if every once in a while you could glance, I will raise my hand when you have about a minute left, okay, so that we can keep track of the time. So thank you again and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Again, my name is John Petito, and I'm with Delmarva Power. I'm a public affairs manager in our Salisbury office here on the shore. Just to start off, I'm going to say a few things about Delmarva Power, and then Bridget will talk a little bit more about the rest of our presentation. But Delmarva Power provides safe, reliable energy to 503 customers in Delaware and Maryland, and 125,000 natural gas customers as well. We are a regulated public utility owned by Pepco Holdings Incorporated, and we have subsidiaries for Atlantic City Electric and Pepco in Washington, D.C. area. A few quick facts about Delmarva Power. We were first incorporated in 1909. We have a service territory of about 5,000 miles. We have electric customers, as I said, about 503,000, 303,000 in Delaware, and 200,000 in Maryland. Gas customers of 125,000. We have 925 employees. We have 3 unions, and we also have 10 facilities that we maintain. We have 184 substations throughout the Delmarva Power territory. And over the last 5 years, we have donated over $3.5 million to charities in our territories. A little bit about electric customer choice that started in Maryland in 1999. The goal of that was to establish customer choice, create competitive retail electric supply market, and deregulate the electric generation market, provide economic benefits to all customers, classes, and also ensure compliance with federal and state environmental standards. So from here, I'm going to let Bridget talk a little bit more about their choice suppliers.
Thank you, John. I just want to say I work for the, I think I'm going to take this off because I'm not that tall. I work for the Office of the Customer Advocate at Delmarva Power, and I do want to recognize the director of our office is in the audience, Felicia Greer. So I just wanted to recognize her and thank her for being part of this. We know in the Office of Customer Advocate that this issue is on the minds of our customers because we get complaints, and we have seen those complaints increase in recent years. Just complaints around confusion more than anything. I got this call, like Greg was saying, strangers calling you and asking you for your account information. It's kind of scary, right? So thank you to Greg here at the center and the League of Women Voters for having this forum. So with what John said around electric choice, what occurred there was a deregulation, essentially separating your bill. One side is supply charges and the other side is delivery charges. And what happened on the supply side is those rates became market-based. So there's competition and choice. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, the supply side is about 60% of your bill. So if there's a choice among suppliers, and one supplier happens to be less expensive than your default supplier, which could be Delmarva Power, then you have an opportunity to save on that side of the bill. And that's really what, in a nutshell, is the goal here, is for customers to have choice and opportunity to save on that supply portion of their bill, which again is 60%. We've seen a decline in the supply rates. That's reflective of the wholesale energy market price, the price for energy. And by that I mean, in 2004, supply rates were, say, 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and now we're down to about 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So we've seen a decrease on the supply rates, and that's good news for customers. We've seen an increase in the suppliers. In 2004, there were 2 suppliers serving residential customers in Delmarva Power's Maryland service territory. Today, there are 20. So that just tells you the significance of the competition. And to that same effect, we had 187 Delmarva Power residential customers that were with another supplier in 2004. Today we have nearly 29,000. So again, residential customers are taking advantage of the choices that they have among suppliers to save money. I think that a question comes, well, how do I save money? How can I calculate my savings? And there's a lot of information out there on Delmarva Power's website, as well as on the Maryland Public Service Commission's website. But if I could just simply say there's a cents per kilowatt hour charge, and if it's 10 cents and you use 1,000 kilowatt hours in a given month, then about $100 is what you're going to pay, right? If a supplier is coming in at 8 cents a kilowatt hour and you use about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, then $80 will be your bill at the end of the month on the supply side. So $20 savings. That's, in that month's time. So that's how you calculate the savings, simply put. There are rules of the road when it comes to choosing a supplier. You'll still call Delmarva Power if your power is out. We are still going to come and restore your service, even if you choose to go with X supplier, okay? And you're still going to call Delmarva Power if you have a concern regarding the delivery charges on your bill, because we still deliver to you, and we still do charge you for delivery of electricity. You will still call Delmarva Power if you need a service connect or disconnect. We're going to still do that for you. You will still call Delmarva Power if you're considering a supplier's offer, but you might have questions about your usage history. Call us. We'll talk to you about that. You will call your supplier, however, if you have a concern with supply charges on your bill. And you'll call your supplier if you have a concern or question about your contract. because the suppliers will ask you to sign a contract. And you will need to call your supplier to cancel that contract if you chose to do so. Delmarva Power cannot cancel your contract with the supplier. You must contact the supplier. So there are lots of questions to ask suppliers, and I could run through them for you real briefly, but you want to be sure that that supplier is certified and licensed by the Maryland Public Service Commission. You want to know, of course, what the total price is per kilowatt hour. You'd like to know if the price is fixed or variable, and what's the length of the contract, and are there any early termination fees? All right, so if it's a 12-month contract and you decide in 9 months you want out, are you going to face a fee? You know, those are the kinds of questions you're going to want to ask. And again, Delmarva has this information on its website, along with the Maryland Public Service Commission. But there's a lot of suppliers are offering bonuses if you sign up with them, so you may want to ask if there's a bonus. You might, want to also ask, what fuels are used by that supplier, if you're interested in green power and so forth. And of course, always get a contact name and a phone number and their customer service hours. And I will ask Greg to possibly, as part of this videotape, put up some links to the websites for information. I think that would be really useful. And that about wraps up my portion of this presentation. I'm going to hand the mic over to my friend Bob here. Oh, you got one? Okay.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Bob Belke. I'm Vice President of Member Affairs for Chesapeake Electric Co-op. Just a little bit, I want to explain the difference between Chesapeake and Delmarva. Delmarva is an investor-owned utility, which means they have shareholders and stockholders. Chesapeake Electric Co-op is a cooperative, which means we're not for profit. So our business models are very much the same, but we do differ in that we are not for profit. So it does change just the way we do business slightly. We do serve all 9 counties, serve in all 9 counties on the shore. And I get the question a lot, well, where do you serve and where does Delmarva serve? Well, our territories are very much intertwined. When it all started, oh, by the way, this is our 75th year, so it's our birthday this year. I wasn't there when we started. But Delmarva served mostly the townships and the municipalities, and then when the co-ops came along, we served the rural parts of the state. So as the towns have expanded and housing developments have grown on the outskirts, we actually have developments where we're on one side of the street and Delmarva's on the other. So it's very difficult to answer that question to say, well, tell me exactly where you are. It's almost a by meter, by location type event. The other thing I want to clear up is we are not in competition with each other. That's also a misnomer that goes around that, well, you guys are in competition with Delmarva. We do get compared a lot on rates, on outage restoration, on almost everything, but we really aren't in competition. One of the other things that comes up a lot with respect to choice is that Chesapeake doesn't participate. Well, that's not true. We do participate. We were governed by the same set of laws that John referred to earlier that came out in 1999. It just so happens that, I guess because of our rate structure, there hasn't been anybody to come in and to Chesapeake's territory that can beat our price to compare. And again, that has nothing to do with Delmarva rates, that's just Chesapeake's rates. And our structure probably keeps those rates a little bit depressed and makes us maybe not so much of a target. We also don't have the commercial application that Delmarva has. We have about 52,000 meters spread out through the 9 counties, and I forget what John would. 300,000. So a little bit disparity there. But nonetheless, we are governed by the same rules, and I'm sure Mr. Czar will tell you in a few moments, there is a process to go through to be a supplier. You have to first be sanctioned by the Public Service Commission and then have a contract with each utility, or the utility in which the service territory you're about to enter into. We've just never had anybody get to the point where they wanted to make a contract with us. I think Bridget did a very good job explaining the process, the billing process, and the rate structure, and the 60% and the 40%, about what part of it is energy and what part of it is distribution. We're very much the same, so there's no need to go back over those statistics. Our power supply procurement is slightly different from an investor-owned, in that we participate with a group called Old Dominion Electric Co-op, ODEC for short. And there are 11 co-ops that make up Old Dominion, and we have an all power requirements contract with them. What that means is any power that we need to buy has to go through ODEC. So you could argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We happen to think it's a good thing, at least at this point, because it looks like our rates are down to the area where there apparently isn't anybody that can come in and compete with them. So I guess I'll wrap it up there, because I can't go into the detail about the problems with competition because we haven't had any in our territory, but I'll certainly be here for questions later.
Good afternoon. My name's Peter Saar. I'm an assistant People's Counsel for the Maryland Office of People's Counsel, and I appreciate the lead-in by Robert in reference to the aspects that our office are involved in before the Public Service Commission. One of the number of different things that we do in that office is primarily represent the residential ratepayers in matters, not individually, but as a class of customer before the Public Service Commission. In probably every filing, we review to see if there are residential ratepayers' interests that are affected by the filings by various utilities. Now, for our purposes, we're focusing right this afternoon on suppliers, and the license application process is actually something that anybody could complete online who was interested in becoming a supplier. That and $400 and proof of your technical and managerial experience and your financial wherewithal to be able to do this kind of work will get you the basic authority to begin to be a supplier in Maryland. And as much as that sounds like, you know, all you need is a little bit of money and you can start doing this business, that's exactly the case. There have been people who are absolutely beginners in the venture, in the adventure of being an electricity supplier or a gas supplier in the state of Maryland. However, that's not the reason I'm here. My real purpose for being here this afternoon is to provide information based on our fact that we have had now multiple years of experience in reviewing license applications and reviewing issues that have been brought to our attention by consumers who have been either confused, which has been the point. Much of the information that's out in the market area for the ordinary consumer to digest is oftentimes can be very confusing and needs some explanation. Half the time our office spends, myself and another member of the office, spend a good piece of every day having a conversation with yet another resident to try to sort out these things so that they can have a better grasp of what is being offered to them by various marketing means. You, I'm sure, have all received mailers of one kind or another from a number of different suppliers saying we can provide you with electricity at a competitive rate. And that's a nice word to say, it's competitive, because it is, you know, competing against the other suppliers who are also mailing you the same kind of information. But they all have little twists. Some of them will offer you fixed rates, you know, for a year, 6 months, a year, 2 year, you know, terms. And or another option is a fixed rate, but that rate is also accompanied by a customer charge. Now, it's a funny thing about having a customer charge. You can find that if you have a customer charge that's imposed in your agreement, that tends to lower the amount of money that they expect you to pay per kilowatt hour, but you're paying the customer charge each month. And you have to, as a consumer, factor that back in to see what your rate is compared to what the utility is paying, you know, is charging for the same level of service. That's just one variation. Another is these offers, for instance, of prepaid credit cards. I know you probably have seen a couple of those come through. We'll give you a $25 or a $50, prepaid credit card if you sign up to be one of our customers. You have to go through the same kind of calculation. How much is this prepaid credit card translate into kilowatt hours, and how much is that then factored into or off of the price that the company is going to be getting from you as a customer, as opposed to what the utility rate would be. Some of those can be, affinity cards to specific stores. You could get a Home Depot card. You could get a Target card. I've seen those. Some have been special gift certificates for dinner at restaurants. Again, depending on, the individual supplier and the type of marketing programming, that they have engaged in. So these, and the one that's really, I've had a member of my office who we have had a conversation about, who was really inspired by the fact that this one company was offering airline points. And in his particular case, he got 15,000 of these for signing up, which for him was very good, because apparently this is what he does all the time, and I only just learned this from another friend in the office. But his problem was, again, that the dealing in the charge per month, they got it right on the beginning, and then they changed it to something else in the middle, a couple months after I had started. And he said, something's wrong here. I know what I had as the conversation with you, but I have not got that represented on my bill. And of course, most of these suppliers will be recording telephone conversations they have with you when you want to sign up. And just to say that we know what you said, even if you can't remember. In his case, he remembered perfectly well, and the company just had not done, through their marketing person on the phone, the adequate job to record what the offer really meant, which was, that's an introductory rate, and after 2 months or 3 months, you're going to have a higher rate, and oh, by the way, it'll be revealed on your bill when you open it up at the end of, month 4. So these are the kinds of things that, some of the things that we have to consider if you're actually going into the business of evaluating supplier offers. And this is not to disparage any suppliers who are sitting to my immediate right. This is a generic, discussion here. The man in my office with whom I spend a great deal of time sharing notes about consumer complaints and consumer issues with regard to suppliers sat down with me just the other day, and I asked him to repeat himself this morning to give some quick pointers, sort of general rules on how to go about getting a supplier. The first primary rule is don't ever provide your account number in advance of knowing everything you need to know about an offer, what a supplier is offering you, what the rate is, what are the terms and conditions, what's the period of your contract, how do you get out of it, are there cancellation fees, are there any monthly customer charges. You need to know all this before you ever provide an account number. The account number is probably the last thing you want to be providing a supplier. That'll be the first thing many of them will be actually asking you, because they'll ask you to get your bill and read to me what your usage is and read to me what your account number is and your address, because that's part of the enrollment process. In other words, to sign up new customers, and they need all this information. And a lot of marketers who are actually third parties who are employed under contract by a supplier to contact customers at their homes, or could be a door-to-door solicitation, could be the same thing, are interested in simply starting the enrollment process as soon as they can, and that would be as soon as they start with an account number. And the rest of it is just fill in the rest of the blanks. And then before you know it, you're signed up with someone, and you may not have yet had a chance to even think about this and say, well, what do I really want to do this? We don't have a rescission period in Maryland. In other words, once you've made that decision to provide an account number, provide your information that makes you a customer for purposes of enrollment, then it's a matter of how do you unwind yourself from that if that's something you don't want to do. And that's where we get into the business of having early termination fees to worry about. It could cost you on a year's contract. Many of the companies we have listed have $150 flat charge for getting out of a contract before the end of its term. And when I say contract, some people will, meaning some suppliers or marketing people will say, we don't even have a contract. We don't have contracts. We just, sign people up. I don't know what they're talking about, but I guess what these marketers presume just because we don't have a 50-page document that has to be initialed by both parties, on every page, is not the same thing. All you need is to have a meeting of the minds and some reflection that these are the things that both sides have agreed upon. And so an invitation, to come and contact us, and a responsive welcome, now you're one of our customers letter that you could get after doing this enrollment process I'm talking about, could be all the contract that you'll have, but those are the documents that constitute what we'll deem in the regulatory world as a contract. So these are things to be concerned with, when you're dealing with suppliers. That was just to get off of point one. I've got 7 more to go, but I'm going through those a little more rapidly. Avoid plans that charge you a monthly fee, which is the customer charge I was talking about. At this point, I took a quick look at a list that our office maintains, and we've been doing one sort of informally for the last 5 years. And there's only one that has a $4.75 charge, customer charge. But you have to understand how our office sort of winnows it through all the suppliers that are out there who have licenses. We approach it from the standpoint of the ordinary consumer. We go to the website of the company and see if we can make a reasonably intelligent, our way through that particular site. Can you find what the contract rate is? Can you find what the terms are? And can you review the terms and conditions before you have to make a decision? That's another piece that I needed to emphasize in this particular presentation. Some sites have them available and you can actually review them. Some that will even let you print those out a little more tricky. Some of it is a little more tricky because you have to sort of copy it and paste it onto another page because they're in a little tiny box and you scroll down on the internet, and makes it very difficult for folks to sit there and look at the entire terms and conditions in one place. So copying and pasting works very nicely in some instances. I'll move on to the third point because I'll probably be chewing up Joe's time here otherwise. The third point that was thought about that was a good idea is to avoid plans that have fees to cancel. Now, the fees to cancel, you have to appreciate from the supplier's point of view, is a sort of a make them whole for the fact that they're losing your business if you're canceling out of your contract early. But the problem is that there's never been a presentation made that I've been a party to, and I've been there now 9 years, excuse me, this summer, and where the suppliers have had to make a presentation to say, this is what it costs us. Not just the purchase of the electricity supply, but how much it costs us to buy the financial instruments that we hedge against the possibility of somebody leaving. Nobody's presented this on a per customer basis from all the suppliers that I've seen. So when they say it costs us $150 or it costs us $25 per month of the number of months remaining on the contract that haven't been canceled, or that are being canceled and haven't been used, it is a little bit of taking the faith of what they offer as the bottom line. But we're in a competitive world. That's what we have to make our decisions, for or against going in a particular direction. There are plans called variable plans. Now, variable plans are basically those that set the price each month. Gas companies, for instance, set prices on a monthly basis. Utilities, when they provide gas, will have a monthly price that will change based on what the market price is. But on electricity, it gets a little more problematic. You have to worry about the fact that if you've got one rate that sort of entices you in, it's like the loss leader that they use at supermarkets. You know, here's a special 2-for deal if you come in and start shopping, and you'll fill your cart with other things because you happen to be at the store and think of other things beyond that specific invitation to start. But that'll change. That introductory rate will change, usually within the very second month. And if you're not following your bill carefully to say, what is the rate now this second month as compared to what the utility rate is, or some other supplier's rate, it doesn't have to be the utility rate, are you still getting the benefit of a good bargain into that second month? That's why we say variable rates you should probably want to avoid, because most people don't want to keep staring at the details of their life. Here's my bill. You know, they're looking at the bottom line. They don't want to be studying every line, every aspect of the bill when it comes due. They just want to make sure the bottom is not being too hard on their wallet. That's all. Of course, it was mentioned that you do want to avoid companies that are not licensed by the Public Service Commission and who are not suppliers. In other words, those who can buy and sell energy. That's not to say there aren't entities out that are brokers, for instance, are people that don't go out and buy. They go out and arrange for customers to be paired up with a supplier to provide a supply of electricity, but they don't buy it themselves. Their company does not buy it themselves on the market. But you can check with the Public Service Commission on their website for all the licenses. You know, if a company gives you a name, you can check that, you know, and verify they are in fact licensed. Our office would also be happy to assist with anybody who needs to check with that kind of information. And going back to this business of terms and conditions, any company that doesn't want to provide you a copy of terms and conditions before you agree to become a customer of theirs is a company you don't want to be involved with as a business relationship to begin with, because they're holding out something from you. They're keeping something away that you need to make a decision as a consumer. There are also important times in the year to recognize so that you have fresh information for you. The utilities change their prices essentially twice a year that are published prices, usually in May and somewhere in September. The prices are listed by the utilities, and somebody can correct me if I'm misquoting it, but I don't think I am too terribly.
No, you're about right.
But the point being is that just before the utilities publish these things, you're going to get a flurry of advertising, mailed advertising, telephone solicitations, people knocking on the door saying, we can give you a great rate because the current rate for the utility is this, and we can give you just below that by whatever number of tenths of a cent below that could be. And all you have to do is sign up for a year. And then a month later, you'll find that the utility suddenly has a price posted that somehow or another isn't that wonderful bargain that you just had a month ago with that supplier knocking on your door. So you need to understand when the suppliers are likely to be out there, and they're always going to tell you, hey, we got a deal, but it's only good for today because I'm here on your phone, I'm here at your door, I'm in your mailbox. You need to grab that deal today. It won't last long. But the only thing you need to worry about is they'll still be pitching that same pitch next week and the week after that and a week after that. There's plenty of time. You just have to recognize as consumers, you'll have the time to make the comparisons that you need with the valid information that you need. That's what the utility prices are. That's what other suppliers' prices are. You don't have to buy the first one that comes to your door, the first one that gets on your telephone, the first one that gets in your mailbox. And then, of course, this is one that he seems frustrated, but he's the one that deals mostly with the consumer complaints about suppliers in our office. He says, read the terms and conditions. Just because you get them is not sufficient. You need to read what it is that you're getting into with these companies and understand it. If you don't understand it, there's no reason to have to rush into it. You just need to understand that once you sign this, this is a legitimate contract between two adult parties, supposed to be on equal terms. Now, we understand that people use legal terms in terms and conditions of contract. The lawyers, those evil people are the ones that draft those things. But they're binding documents, and that's the point. The supplier can, in fact, have you taken to court to enforce that if they choose to do so. And certainly can make it difficult down the line for any consumer who has, and legitimately, I early on now, 3 or 4 years ago, I was dealing with one supplier who was in the business of signing up consumers for 4 and 5 year fixed contracts. And then the month after that introductory attractive rate, passed, and they were put on the normal rate that they were going to experience, found it to be like 2 and 3 cents higher than what the utility was paying. And the cost of early termination for the 4 and 5 year contracts were around $1,700. So I'm just saying, folks, understand what you're getting into. Read the terms and conditions. You have an ability to be able to save some money on electric supply, but you have to understand what you're getting into, and you have to enter it with your eyes wide open and with a complete understanding before you provide the information the supplier will need to conclude the contract between you and he. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Joe Tabling. I am with CQI Associates, but I'm here today representing aggregators and brokers throughout the various states, Maryland, Delaware, DC, and so on. Let me first start off by giving you a definition of what a broker and what an aggregator is. Brokers are representatives of either one or possibly two suppliers that's actually generating or purchasing electricity or natural gas. Aggregators are individuals or businesses that pull together a variety of different units, whether it's thousands of residents usage together or thousands or hundreds of businesses usage together, and using that higher volume to leverage and negotiate a lower rate on your behalf. So that's basically how it's the two that are out there. 95% of the folks that you were encountering either on the phone, by mail, or by door to door are brokers. And of the brokers that you're dealing with, a good 90% of them are with multi-level marketing companies. Now, I have nothing against multi-level marketing companies, but you have to understand that when you are working with a commission-based individual, their sole purpose is making sales, okay? Their commission is being paid by the bill that you pay, by the rate that you pay. So you have to keep that in mind. Now, there's a lot of confusion that has happened over the last couple of years, and I'll look at a couple things. First off, I'm grateful, and all of us should be grateful, that there are so many different suppliers out there at this time. And why I say that is because that is bringing to light and bringing into everybody's mind and focus the opportunity of saving money. We're not forgetting about it. We've had the capability of switching third-party suppliers for over 10 years. But only 18% of residents have actually made the switch over. It's starting to escalate because of the number of brokers, independent agents, aggregates that are out there. So I'm very grateful for that. What I'm not grateful for as a consumer myself is the lack of answers to your questions and the misconfusion that is being presented to you, which is resulting in virtually what I call the ostrich head in the sand scenario, hoping that, okay, I don't want to listen anymore to this, I hope it all goes away, and I survive all of the increases, okay? Let me try to simplify it so it's a little bit easier for you to understand. For the folks that are in the Chop Tank area, I had a lot of questions come up going, am I missing out on opportunities because I don't seem to see a third-party provider in that area? Absolutely not. You're getting the lowest, if not one of the lowest in a tri-state area, okay? So if you're with Chop Tank, don't worry, okay? You're getting great rates, don't worry about it, okay? For the folks that are not with Chop Tank, and you have options that are out there, listen to and read and listen to the person that's in front of you about their opportunity. But just like Peter said, do not, and I repeat, do not make a decision right then and there, okay? You have the opportunity to research, and one of the best places to research is the Office of People's Counsel. They have an amazing spreadsheet there that's very, very easy to read. It shows the default supplier. In this case, it shows Delmarva Power. It'll show you what their variable rate is, their winter rate, summer rate. Summer rate's high, winter rate's low. When you're looking at a lot of your third-party providers that are out there, they offer a fixed rate program. And what sometimes is confusing is that you may be talking to folks now, and you're looking at your bill and going, well, why are you charging or telling me that your rate's 8.8? I'm paying 8.6 or 8.5 now. Because you're in a winter rate, which is a lower rate. So when you're looking at a fixed rate, you look at, in this case, Delmarva Power's weighted average. And that's basically the winter rate, the summer rate, combined together and then averaged out. And that rate right there that they show you, you compared that to the fixed rate that the supplier is offering you. On the spreadsheet that the Office of People's Counsel provides, they show the winter rate, the summer rate, the weighted average. Right below that is every licensed supplier, their name, the rate, the early termination fee, if there's any monthly fees, it's all spelled out for you. If you sat down and called every supplier, you're going to be on the phone for probably 20 to 25 hours, okay? I think all of us here can think of a lot more things to do with our time than doing that. Here, the Office of People's Counsel has provided that information to each and every one of us, and I strongly advise everybody to look at that. That's going to give you a lot of pertinent information. When you're looking at the rates themselves, okay, several years ago, there was a very large difference from the default rate, in this case, Delmarva Power, compared to third-party providers. That's not the case anymore. It is very, very competitive nowadays, where you're talking anywhere from a penny to maybe 1/1,000,000th of a cent difference. It's that close, okay? But there's still savings to be had. Anybody that is sitting in this audience or listening to this tape has the capability of saving money. Now, there's a lot of folks that are out there that will throw out a percentage for savings. 18, 20, 30, I've seen them all, okay? Because of the different calculations that are being used to calculate and show that savings, you're not really supposed to use savings as far as the percentage-wise. We tend to look at historical data for what we do and all the different suppliers are out there. And the average consumer, the savings you will see is if you take the largest bill in a 12-month period, the entire bill, that's your annual savings. Now, that'll vary from resident to resident. I had one young lady that said to me that their highest bill was $40 a month. And I asked her if she lived in a tent, because I don't know how she's doing it for $40 a month. The highest I've heard was $960. So the savings is going to be different from each and every individual. And that's the big advantage with this. Initially, when this came into effect, it was to save money. For people that are on a fixed income, $1 is like $1,000 to somebody else, okay? So each individual has to make that decision. Now what's happening is that we're starting to see an increase in a variety of charges. So the urgency of switching over to a third-party provider isn't so much for the savings as it is for budget stability, okay? So that's one of the things you really have to start looking at. Peter pointed out as far as terms and conditions. Recently, and pricing. Recently, two things have started to occur. And everybody here that's participating, watching, gets up in the morning, fixes a cup of coffee, you have common sense. And what I mean by that is that when you look at the spreadsheet from the Office of People's Counsel and you look at all the rates, everybody's buying in the same area, what they call the PGM, or the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland corridor, okay? Now it also includes Virginia, Ohio, but they didn't add the other initials in. If you're looking at 10 suppliers, let's say there's 12 on the sheet, and 10 suppliers are between 8.8 and 8.9. They're all real close. And the bottom two is 7.9 and 8.0. A flag should go up real quick. How are they getting that rate if they're buying it just like everybody else? And what's happening with some of the suppliers is they're actually pulling back a couple of the ancillary charges that everybody else is including in their rate so they can show a lower rate. You don't find out about these ancillary charges until 60 days later, because we don't pay for our energy ahead. So it's on that 60-day later period when you get your bill, you look at it and go, what's these other rates? And when you add them together, you end up paying either equal to where you came from or more. So keep that in mind. The other thing that we became aware of, and I know the Public Service Commission is also being aware of, and we're explaining to folks, everybody, is that some of the companies have altered their terms and conditions. They now have a new line in the terms and conditions that now states that for whatever reason, at any time, that supplier can terminate your agreement without notifying you. What that means is that if they feel they're losing money on your account, they can drop you and throw you back to the default supplier with you not knowing anything that's going on. Okay? So you're not saving any money at that point. So you want to be aware of those things. The Public Service Commission and the Office of People's Counsel are departments that are on your side. Utilize them. If you have questions, ask them. We as a individual company, we're a family operated business. We live in the same sectors as you do. I actually live on the other side of the bridge, but I pay bills just like you. I work with the different third-party suppliers just like you, and I deal with the same situations just like you. Our attitude is knowledge is king. Don't let anybody try to convince you of what to do or what not to do. Get all of your questions answered. If you have a question that nobody's answering, and I would be very, very surprised if you called Peter or the Public Service Commission that you didn't get the proper answer. But if not, call me, okay? We'll tell you honestly, what is going on. Our attitude is we're from old school, and when you're dealing with any kind of aggregators or brokers that are out there, old school is building up a relationship, taking your concerns and your issues at hand first, more so than worrying about a profit or getting your account or making a quota, okay? When you have close to 2,500 independent brokers that are in the state of Maryland alone, that's why you're getting so many phone calls, you're getting so many doorbell rings, and so many pieces of paper. And in a lot of cases, you could have 700 to 800 that are with the same company, and they're all telling you something different. okay, because they're not properly trained. So the key that we always suggest, first and foremost, always remember this, go to the Office of People's Counsel, look at the spreadsheet, okay? That's going to give you a lot of valid information. Go with companies that you recognize the name. Direct Energy, Washington Gas, Constellation Energy. These are companies that have been around for a long time. If you see Blue Sky Energy, where'd they come from, okay? Go with ones that are tried and true, that have been around a long time, and they're looking at your best interest, okay? If you have questions also, contact Delmarva Power. With all of us sitting here, this should show to you that we're not at each other's throats. We're all working together to give you the best opportunity of saving money, okay? They're not going to hang up on you. Delmarva's not going to hang up with you if you're with a third-party provider and have a problem. They're there to help you still. Same thing with Chop Tank, okay? Everybody's here to help. The information's there. Utilize the information, make your decision. But definitely, you want to make that move and save that money, because every penny counts nowadays. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this most interesting suite of presentations. I left out one, it's not quite a presentation. Easton Municipal Utilities was not able to send a representative today. Greg, how long will it take you to read the talking points?
5 minutes or less.
James, do we have enough time? Yes. Okay, so we will, if you will read them, because that way we'll have a complete picture. And then we will take a 15-minute break in which, if you have questions, I hope you will write them. Barbara has the index cards on which to write your questions. Then we will collect them and look at them and ask the panelists for their responses to those questions. So, Greg, thank you.
I think you have my talking points. All right. The following talking points came to me from Jeff Oxnam, who's the vice president at the Town of Easton Municipal Utilities. I had originally hoped to have him present this afternoon, sort of round out the utility picture here on the Eastern Shore, and he passed his condolences along and his apologies that he couldn't be here this afternoon. But he did send me a couple pages of brief notes that he wanted me to introduce. By way of background, Easton Utilities is a municipal utility company. They generate their own electricity, and they are owned by the residents of the town of Easton. So if you live within Easton town limits, you are by default one of their customers. They are also, like Chop Tank Electric, a not-for-profit utility. And he states here that they are not funded by tax revenues. It says that, in fact, they make a payment in lieu of taxes that makes Easton Utilities the largest single source of revenue for the town of Easton. They serve approximately, there are approximately 2,000 municipal utilities in the United States. Most of them are small, but some are as big as the one serving the city of Los Angeles, which has its own municipal utility. And they are one of only a handful of those municipal utilities that, in addition to electricity, also provide water and wastewater services, natural gas, internet and cable TV service. Originally, Easton apparently produced all the electricity that it used, and today he notes that it's more cost-effective to purchase the electricity they need elsewhere and then just have it delivered. So while they do have some generation capacity, they do purchase some of their own. Compared to big nuclear, coal, or hydroelectric generators, they have 16 diesel or natural gas generators that are relatively expensive to run, so they purchase some of their power for that reason. They buy the energy their customers need and sell it to customers at the same rate. There is no markup. Easton Utilities purchases energy through a combination of bilateral contracts, which he notes here are direct deals with companies that generate electricity elsewhere, or from the PJM grid interconnection. That's the world's largest wholesale energy market. PJM sells energy in real time, just like the stock market does, and it also sells on a day-ahead market, so utilities can buy anything they're not receiving from bilateral contracts or generating themselves. As I understand it, this is a way, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a way to provide additional supply in times of high demand. Is that correct? There are times on very hot summer days or very cold winter days when it's cheaper to run their own generators than to buy off the grid, and on those days they sell their energy into the grid and give all the profit back to the customer base. And for those of you who live in and around Easton, one of those generators is right downtown, where right behind the plaza that has the Acme and the sort of set of stores that's anchored by Peebles. There's a diesel generator down there that makes a great deal of noise, actually. They occasionally generate their own electricity when there are problems with other generations or other substations nearby, but they do generate for less than 5% of the year. And they receive financial credits simply for having enough generators to cover their own load, but that makes it still worthwhile to keep them active and available. Next section of his notes are how much electricity costs from Easton Utilities. Easton's average price per kilowatt hour is 10.8 cents, and he notes here that he thinks that's the lowest price in the region. In 2012, a typical residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours spent $23.70 per month less with Easton Utilities than he or she would with other regional providers. Nationwide, municipal utilities have rates that are approximately 10% lower than investor-owned utilities. Easton is 18% less than the national average. And Easton's price varies each month with the market price of electricity. When market prices increase, their rates do increase. When market prices decrease, their rates do decrease. Easton Utilities does not participate in customer choice. And Jeff explained a little bit about this to me over the phone, but he notes that when customer choice was proposed in the late 1990s, municipal utilities in Maryland, all 5 of them, were given the option not to participate. The municipal utilities, including here on the shore, Easton and Berlin, opted not to participate because they already do what the goal of choice is designed to do. They aggregate customers and present them to the energy market. So they're effectively behaving as an aggregator that way. When Maryland implemented choice for consumers, it artificially lowered electric rates for all of the investor-owned utilities and then froze those rates for 5 years. And this was the only time in recent history that Easton's prices, which were not capped, approached those of investor-owned utilities. Once the price caps came off and expired, electricity prices for investor-owned utilities, his verb here, not mine, is spiked, and he said Easton's prices did not. Occasionally, the direct mail solicitations from energy brokers are accidentally sent to Easton Utilities customers. They evaluated the rates, and the last one they received at their office, and Easton's rates were lower by 15% than the quote-unquote great deal being offered by the independent company. So I hope that answers most of the questions about what the municipal utility does in this area.
What I wanted to say was, please be back here no later than, was it 5:10 now, 5:25, so that we can start on time and have the maximum amount of time to deal with the questions that you might have. So thank you very much, and we'll reconvene at 5:25. Thank you.
It's like old times. Oh, you do. Maybe you do. When did that happen?
I think we're about ready to begin again.
Oh.
Don't want to waste any of this precious time this afternoon. It's been, I think, very helpful to listen again and to have an increased understanding of the complexity of this area. I'm going to start with the 3 written questions that I've received, and we will then I think we will open it up the panelists may have some questions of each other or areas where they think they can usefully clarify, a point where they felt a bit rushed, and also take questions from the audience. I want to make sure that we get the most that we can in terms of understanding, because the taping will be used for educational purposes, and so we might as well have the best information that we can extract from this particular forum. Well, the first question is specific to Chop Tank Electric, and it says, on the Chop Tank Electric bill, what is the, quote, power cost adjustment, and how is it figured?
Well, that's a good question, mostly because I know the answer. Excellent questions are the ones I don't know the answer to. What we have is we have a fixed rate that's filed with the Public Service Commission, but because rates or fuel costs and energy prices do fluctuate a little bit, as Bridget pointed out earlier, we buy from the market. Sometimes they change periodically. And to keep us from having to go to the Public Service Commission and ask for a rate adjustment, either up or down, whatever it is, there is a range that we can work in with that power cost adjustment. Presently, it's a negative factor. So it's volumetric, meaning that it's applied by how many kilowatt hours are used. And then it's a negative factor, like I said, so it does come off the bill. I hope that answered it correctly. Don't know who answered. Was that clear, Mr. Farley? Thank you.
Okay. And when you say it comes off the bill, it lowers the bill.
It does lower the bill. I mean, it's, let's see, matter of fact, I printed my bill before I came. So my power cost adjustment for this period for my March bill was actually a reduction of $20. But I had a high bill because my kids were home.
Okay, well, that answers that question. And it's nice to know that your bill can actually be lower from month to month because of this cost adjustment.
Well, it is a true reflection of the market pricing.
Right, yes. So the next question is, will the suppliers be able to acquire electricity in quantity and in a steady stream adequate to meet the needs of a population increasingly buffered by severe weather? That's part one. Part two, do you see this affecting consumer pricing on an ongoing basis? The second part of it. And I open it up to the panel to make whatever comments or offer any thoughts they might have. Do you need me to repeat the question? It was long.
I can answer or at least start.
All right.
As far as suppliers are concerned, as far as energy is concerned, you're never, if you go to in my interpretation of the question and what it sounds like is that one of the concerns is, will you ever run out of power if you go to a third-party supplier? Are you going to be sitting in the dark because of storms and things of that nature? When you go with a third-party supplier, let's take the worst-case scenario: the third-party supplier goes belly up financially, or they run out of power, or they didn't buy enough power, something like that. Your default supplier, in this case, most cases, Delmarva Power, is going to click right in. You're not going to miss a beat. Okay, so it's not going to be a situation where you ran out of power. Now, there may be times as far as that the lines go down, the generators rupture, or things of that nature. But every trigger, every mechanism can be put into place to prevent every consumer from not running out of power or running out of gas is put into place, constantly maintained and orchestrated. And I believe the representatives of Chop Tank and Delmarva can vouch for that. That you can rest assured that unless there's something unbelievable that rips all the power lines down that prevents you from giving the energy, you're never going to run into the situation of not having energy going there. There's always going to be opportunities for the suppliers to buy energy from a variety of sources. So that's always going to be the key.
So in other words, you're saying that unless the disruption is actually on the distribution side, you should have an adequate flow of electricity.
You're always going to have an adequate flow.
Yes.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Well, actually, you're talking about two different things. A
Yes.
disruption and an outage are different from supply issues.
Right.
And I'm stepping into a world that I don't deal with a lot, which is power purchase, and perhaps John may know a little bit more, Bridget. My understanding is that when we bid into the PJM, the market that we talked about earlier, that if we said, all right, we're going to need 100 megawatts of power, we have to have supplies out there for 115. So there is a built-in overage, if you will, and that covers weather anomalies or other such factors that might cause you to go over what your projection is. So that, given the case, I think suppliers are held to that same standard. So there is a buffer to a point.
And I would just add, because part two of that question was around prices and severe weather impacting prices. And most definitely, severe weather can impact prices from the standpoint of the wholesale energy market, the price, for energy. In 2005, when we saw Hurricane Katrina and Rita, hit back to back the way they did, we also came off a record hot summer. Prices skyrocketed, the wholesale price for energy. And so while you may be locked into a price, our prices are set in May, June 1st and October 1st, but then when we go back to the market to bid for more supply, chances are we're going to be paying more for it because of that severe weather impacting perhaps natural gas production facilities. And if we're paying more, that's going to be passed on to the consumer because supply charges are a pass-through to the consumer. Delmarva Power does not profit off of the supply charges.
I just wanted to add what Joe had said. If you were a Delmarva Power customer and you decided to go to a third-party supplier, whatever happens, you decided to leave early, opt out of your contract, or if for some reason they belly up, you would come directly back to Delmarva Power. So you would always have the supply with Delmarva Power. So you would always be in good hands.
So the default supplier is there with built-in reliability of supply in a situation such as going belly up or running or something else happening.
Right. Getting
Yeah.
out of your contract early because you just had a bad experience, you would come right back to Delmarva Power.
Okay. Yes.
And because we are the default supplier, we don't do marketing, okay? We're not in the business of marketing and saying, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we want your business. So just be aware of that too, that we're not going to be the ones that call you and say, hi, this is Delmarva Power. May I please have some information about your account because I'm looking to serve you. Okay, just to understand that as well.
Good. Thank you. I'll go to the third written question. How do you think new generation sources, such as offshore wind or the new gas-fired plant in Delaware, will affect supply prices? And how does that need to inform customers who are considering changing suppliers?
Wants to go first.
Well, some of the alternate supply sides, like offshore wind, isn't total reliable because if the wind doesn't blow, there isn't there's no anything generating, so it's really hard to answer with the other alternatives. I know all of us are trying to. The governor has come up with a standard of to try to have alternate energy of 35% in the next couple of years, and we are, and as Chop Tank is working toward that goal of coming up with alternate energy sources with anyone who is willing to work with us and come up with anything they can that will help that goal.
I would just say there's so much that that impacts supply, prices, and more supply could bring down prices, particularly on the peninsula where you have congestion issues. And so with the gas plant in Dover, hopefully that will help bring down the price some for those that live on the peninsula due to those congestion issues. When you have congestion issues, you have capacity charges that are kind of inflating the price of supply, and that's really at a high level because I don't want to get into the weeds of how these prices work. But so that's good news, I think, if we can ease the congestion and bring down the capacity charges. But renewable energy is more expensive than your traditional fossil fuel generated energy. And so, but there are many that believe it's worth paying that additional price. And that's, the governors all have rather ambitious renewable goals, for a certain percentage of the supply to come from renewable sources. And we're working hard to meet those goals. But we're also working hard to help customers reduce their energy usage because that is what drives your bill. So we have a lot of information on our website and a lot of collateral material and brochures that I handed out to the audience during the break about saving energy and money, because if you reduce your usage, you're going to reduce your bill.
And just to add a thought in terms of a reduction of usage, one of the prime things that an individual homeowner can do for themselves is get themselves an energy audit through the utility and or some other company that's licensed by the state of Maryland to examine what your energy usage is and how efficient your home is. Some of the simplest things that may be silly to think, but some of the simplest solutions are to add a sufficient additional layer of insulation, for instance, in the attic, and perhaps beef up what you have in the walls, and or take a look at what kind of windows and whether they're drafty and single pane versus getting a dual or triple pane window replacement for those kinds of things. Lots of little steps that the individual can take in their home to help knock down the amount of usage for any homeowner.
I just kind of springboard a little bit off what John and Bridget said. Offshore wind is very expensive power. The projections are to be somewhere in the 20 to 25 cent range, which is, as you heard earlier, some of the suppliers are in the 8 and 9 cent range. So you can see the disparity in the cost. All renewables are more expensive than the traditional fuel sources that we have now. Onshore wind's not quite as expensive, and solar is somewhere in between. We do have the RPS, which is the Renewable Portfolio Standard, so the utilities are required to have certain percentages of different renewables within their portfolio, and as time goes forward, those percentages get larger. Right now, I don't think it's a tremendous impact on the bottom line by introducing these or having to have these in your portfolio, but as those percentages get bigger, it definitely will have a price impact. As John said, hopefully, those production sources will become more price competitive as we go forward, and maybe that'll lessen the impact. And I guess, Joe, do suppliers have to have renewables in your portfolio?
They don't have to have, but virtually every supplier out there has a minimum of 5% of renewable energy built into their basic rate structure. They also have two other programs, 50% and 100% renewable power. They will generally run at a higher cost per kilowatt rate. And in some cases, you could go to a 50% renewable energy program and still save money compared to the default. In other cases, you go to 100%, which is either equal to default or to higher. I think overall, it's good that every one of us throughout the entire country is looking at renewable sources for energy. I think it's something that we have to pursue. Our traditional methods of using fossil fuels is either going to, in certain areas, either run out or it's going to become more and more expensive to do compared to the renewable energy sources. So I think it's very important that we pursue renewable energy. Right now, it's not cost effective. It's better to stay with the traditional methods. But as we go into the future and we think about our children and our grandchildren, those renewable energy sources are going to be key for supplying us with the lights we see here today. And I agree with the rest of the panel here. When it comes to overall savings, it's a two-step process. The first step is reducing the rate in which you're paying for electricity, and then the second step, which creates the greatest savings in your wallets, is learning how to reduce consumption.
That concludes the written questions we have. I think we have 15 minutes here. We can, I think it might be useful to, if there's no objection, to sort of broaden the dialogue perhaps by building on some of the observations that the panelists have made. One of the questions that I have always had, and I will exercise a prerogative as moderator here, is I have always been had questions about the vulnerabilities of renewables. For instance, some of the, I understand, this is a layperson's understanding. I understand, for instance, that some of the technology that underlies renewables would require, for instance, the use of rare earths. And rare earths come from only certain parts of the world, I believe, in sufficient quantity to make their extraction profitable. And so countries that would not have supplies of rare earth would be of necessity having to import technologies using rare earths. Would that not introduce, I mean, this is a layperson's question, some vulnerabilities in terms of the reliability of supply from renewables? As I said, I am just broadening it as a logical extension of the conversation. I don't want to dominate it, and then we can turn to the rest of either to the panelists for their questions or additional observations, or to our audience.
Thank you all for jumping up.
I'll let you go first.
Let me make sure I understand the question. Are you talking about the materials, particularly with solar panels, the excavation of boron?
I am talking about those sorts of materials, yes.
Well, and I have a very limited knowledge of that, but boron is very expensive, and the process to mine it and turn it into the proper, I guess, filament, for lack of a better term, to do the solar conversion is quite expensive. And I do know that there just happened to be a symposium, I think 2 weeks ago in Baltimore, where they were trying to figure out a better way to come up with efficiencies for solar transformation. Yeah. And I don't know much more about it than that. So certainly, if they can find a less expensive way, that would add to the proliferation of solar and hopefully lower the overall cost as is introduced into the grid. But that's my limited expertise in that.
What I can tell you with renewable energy is that it's like any kind of new technology or new product that comes onto the market. If you look at computers when they first started, there were gigantic boxes. They were very expensive to produce. Now we carry them on our hip pocket, which we thought were originally phones. Now they're mini computers. As the technology advances, raw materials less are being used, more artificial materials are being used. And that's the same thing with renewable energy products, whether you're dealing with solar, whether you're dealing with wind, geothermal. The application initially is expensive, and that's where we're incurring right now. But as the technology advances, you're going to see less of the raw materials coming from the earth to provide that same energy that we're looking to have. So vulnerability in any aspect, you're always going to have some of it, but because of regulations, because of advanced technology, the risk is diminished greatly as we progress down the road.
Thank you.
We concur with what Bob said.
Thank you.
And I could say that, I mean, you know, I could talk deregulation all night, but that's I don't, you know, the competitive generator is just, you know, another forum maybe.
Thank you. Now, do we have any questions from the audience?
You were mentioning that if a supplier was unable to meet the contract, that it would go back to the default supplier. Does that mean it would end the contract then?
Yes, that's correct. The same thing applies if you happen to move to another residence. What usually you'll contact, in this case, Delmarva Power, and tell them if you're moving. They will terminate that account number. And at the same time, that third-party agreement is also terminated. Now, it doesn't apply for businesses. That's a different program. But for residents, yes. Yes, ma'am.
The economy has been in not very good shape for quite some time now, and I'm wondering how all of the utilities, how do you work with the social service agencies and other governmental bodies that try to keep consumers warm and food on the table and that sort of thing, in terms of your rates, when people can't pay their bills? How do you respond? Is there a formula? Is there a law? How do you handle it?
You guys want to answer that? I can answer, but I know you guys should be able to.
Yeah, no, I'll answer that, and then I'm sure Bob has an answer as well. For us, you know, disconnection is a last resort. We have deferred payment arrangements that we establish for customers who are struggling, you know, to pay, you know, the bill. And we also have programs such as the Good Neighbor Energy Fund, which, you know, if someone like yourself wants to help, you know, a person who could be struggling, you know, pay, you know, say you put a little bit of money in that Good Neighbor Energy Fund envelope, and the company matches $1 for every $3 that comes in. So, so that is then administered by the Salvation Army, and so that's one program. We are always networking with the agencies, you know, to get, you know, Universal Service Fund grants and so forth to the right customers, you know, for those eligible customers, if you will. And we also now have a gift of energy program where you can actually go online or into a walk-in office and purchase a gift of energy for a customer. So we're really trying to think outside the box in a number of ways that we can have programs to assist those customers that you're talking about, because you're correct. I mean, we have seen the number of customers struggling to pay their bill grow during these hard economic times, and we're concerned about it too. But like I said, we're also trying to come up with more programs and contribute money and work with the customers the best that we can.
Thank you.
We also have a brochure that we're handing out that has a lot of great information in it. Just in the state of Maryland, there's the Office of Home Energy Programs that help people pay utility bills, MEEP, a Maryland Energy Assistance Program that also helps, and the Electric Universal Service Program. So there's a lot of great programs in Maryland that you can get assistance in paying your electrical bills.
Thanks. Certainly, we'll mirror everything that Bridget and John said, because all the utilities are required to act pretty much in the same fashion with regard to low income or folks that can't pay their bills. If you look on your bill, there is the universal service charge. It's 37 cents a month for all residential accounts, and that goes into a fund to help fuel some of the MEEP and the EUSP. Also, if folks that are in trouble, we have budget plans. Some are mandated and some are instituted at Choptank to try to get them through the winter time to allow them the shoulder months to catch up their bills. So again, mirroring what Bridget said, we're concerned. We don't like to turn people off. That's not our job. Our job is to provide service and to provide a better way of life for people that live in our service territories, and putting them in the dark doesn't answer that mantra.
One of the questions that I have, as I have listened to the panel, and again, when we did a version of this forum in August of 2012, it seems to me that there's a certain amount of computer literacy that is required in order to take advantage of the alternative supplier provisions and opportunities, in order to make certain that one is on a routine basis monitoring. And most of that is done via website, is it not? Except for perhaps calling OPC with questions, or are there other ways where someone less than computer literate could avail themselves of this opportunity?
Well, if I can answer that. Every supplier out there has a website, and everybody's using the technology nowadays to get the so-called point across, to give you as much information as possible that you could read at your convenience. There is more stress, I should say, on the technology and utilizing that than verbal or somebody making a phone call to you, because of the misinformation that's been given out over the years by different brokers telling a resident or an individual one thing, signing them up, and when you get your bill, you find out that the rate that you were told on the phone is different than what is on your bill. So there's a lot of laws and guidelines that are put into place that you are the ones that do the enrollment. That way you see the rate, you're able to say, yes, I understand, you're reading everything right there. Now, for the folks that are not computer savvy, okay, and there's a lot of us out there, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. I mean, it happens. It makes it somewhat challenging, but you have to understand that it's been put in place to protect you as an individual. It's not trying to make it more difficult for you. It's just trying to give you the universal knowledge. The public libraries have computers out there. A lot of us have grandchildren, and we can utilize them to help guide us through the thing. But it's designed to be a benefit and not a hindrance when it comes to the proper information.
Anyone else? Well, I'm looking at the clock. I see that we are at 6 o'clock, and so it is time to adjourn. I want to thank all of our panelists for giving us, I think, an excellent overview this afternoon, very informative, and I thank everyone for attending. I thank Greg and CLEAN, I like the acronym, the Institute for hosting this forum, and I appreciate the opportunity, the League does appreciate the opportunity to be part of this process. So thank you.